Good evening, everybody. We've extended lockdown, and that seems to have brought some warm weather, so now we can get to know what lockdown is like with warm weather. We know what lockdown is like with cold weather, so we'll see if it's any different. So we might as well make the best of our lockdowns, carrying on practicing the Dhamma, chanting, meditating, and tonight is a Q&A session, so I think we have some questions and we'll do our best to give you some answers.
The first question is, Dear Lung Pa, during sitting meditation, my hands become tense and stiff. At that time, should I contemplate that there is stiffness, or should I make intentions to relax the hands?
Well, when practicing sitting meditation, it's a good habit to get into is always to begin your meditation by practicing mindfulness of the body. Whatever your meditation technique, and whether you've done any chanting or other ritual aside from that, to take a moment or two to become mindful of your posture. The Buddha said, sit up straight, so put energy into sitting up straight, raise your back. And normally we sit, whether sitting on a chair or on the floor, we put our hands usually on our lap. The classic posture is right hand on left hand with thumbs touching. If you ever see pictures of Luang Por Chah, he usually has that posture, and he always looks very peaceful and graceful as he's sitting like that. But you have to find a posture that's comfortable for you, both the way your legs are, the back, and then the hands. And another part of that preparation for your meditation is to become aware of any tension, particularly muscle tension or stiffness in the body that is easily remedied. Sometimes we sit in a way where we tense our muscles just through a lack of mindfulness or awareness. We don't know what we're doing. And so to spend a few moments sending your attention around your body and consciously relaxing is a very good beginning for your meditation. So with the question of your hands, so if your hands feel stiff, especially if you're meditating regularly, you'll get to know whether that stiffness is a matter of maybe the aging of your body. As we get older, our joints do unfortunately become stiffer, whether it's the knees or the hands, sometimes through other activities we're involved with. So, for example, these days people hold their mobile phones a lot, texting and phoning and looking at things, and they experience stiffness of the hands. So when they come to meditate, they're becoming mindful of the feeling in their hands, which is maybe a result of holding a mobile phone, or it could be other actions that we do regularly, driving, lifting things. So as you become mindful of your hands and the feelings, sensations around your hands, you're learning what's causing any feeling of stiffness. Is it accumulated feeling based on what your hands have been doing at other times? Is it from aging? Or is it perhaps just from tensing up as you start your meditation? And that's also quite common because we have our faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and our wish to meditate successfully, become mindful as we meditate. We put effort into it, and sometimes that effort is expressed in our posture. So it could be holding your hands very tightly together to try and establish concentration, not let your mind wander off anywhere, so you get a kind of a natural tensing of the hands muscles. So if that's the case, and you become aware of that, well, consciously relax the hands. It doesn't matter if the thumbs are not touching, the hands are not touching, but just relax them where they are, so that they're not a cause for concern, they're not a distraction, and you're allowing the blood to flow around your body. The mental and physical energy can relax when you relax your body. So you've got to learn to work out which it is. If it's just stiffness in the finger joints or the hands through aging or from other activities, you might just have to accept that. Be patient with it. Accept this is one feeling that's not going to go away very easily. Just as other parts of the body, you may also have various painful sensations that are not unbearable, but they're not going to disappear. And especially as you get older, as we all do, you'll get more of them, unfortunately. So you have to learn how to adjust and be prepared just to be patient with these various feelings. If you can't relax and get rid of them that way, you might have to put up with them. And when you're putting up with them, once you've established that it's a sensation, a feeling that you can't do much about, you can sometimes focus mindfulness on the feeling and teach yourself as you're becoming mindful of those sensations that these are just feelings, painful feelings, what we call dukkha vedana, arising and ceasing in your consciousness, and you'll notice the feeling is more intense sometimes, less intense sometimes, and sometimes it disappears altogether, because feeling, like other parts of our body and mind, is impermanent. It's an impermanent experience. So it comes and goes. It's more intense, it's less intense, and you can learn from that. So that's investigating feeling in association with your hands. But also, part of your meditation is just learning to develop mindfulness on an object, one single object. So if that's the breath, once you have relaxed your posture, you're sitting in a reasonably good posture that you can hold comfortably, you can just let go of all concern for your posture, including your hands, and just focus your mind on the breath. Pay attention to the in and out breath and forget everything else. And if your posture is reasonable, you can hold it comfortably, then you can afford to let go of your body. Not worry about it, not think about it, just focus all your attention on the breath. And the breath is part of the body, and it will have a good effect. The more mindful of the breath you become, the more energy, pranic or samadhi energy you'll gain, and that will flow around the body quite naturally. So it will help you to sit up straight, feel more comfortable, and maybe even soothe painful feelings you have in the body, or they may even disappear. But once you're progressing in your meditation practice, you can afford to let go of the concerns for the body and just forget all about them and get into the breath. Eventually, if you attain some state of calm, and mindfulness is with the breath over and over again for a long period of time, and your mindfulness becomes more continuous, the state of mind becomes more refined as the factors of samadhi emerge. So you might have some piti and sukha, joy, rapture, and happiness, contentment, and then one-pointed awareness on the breath, and the mind and the breath seem to merge. We might find you can sit for long periods, and even though there may be painful sensations around the body, you're not bothered by them because your mind is content to be with the breath. And only maybe at the end of your meditation, when your mind withdraws from the breath and that state of samadhi, then you start to become aware of the sensations of the body again. And it can be a wake-up call. Oh, I've still got this pain in my hands or other parts of the body, and the body feels heavy, may feel tired. But now, because you've practiced mindfulness and you're much more mindful of these things, they don't have to cause concern, be a cause for negative thinking, worry, aversion. You're just knowing the feelings. And any particular feeling that grabs you, say the feeling in your hands, just practice mindfulness of feeling. Be aware of the feeling, and don't let the mind stray into negative thoughts. When we're not very mindful, we identify with a feeling, and it can produce worry, anxiety, aversion, and we suffer with it. But when we're mindful, it's just a feeling. And you're seeing feeling as just feeling, meaning you're not identifying with it and making it into a person, a being. So not making it into who you are, that feeling. It's just feeling arising, passing away, because your mind has, as if, expanded to be bigger than the feeling, and it can contain the feeling but without getting stressed by it or suffering with it. So part of meditation is becoming mindful of body, aware of body, and if there are particular tense sensations or pain, tension, well, consciously try to relax. But if there's nothing you can do about it, just be patient with it and go back to your breath. Teachers like Ajahn Chah and other meditation masters that we know and respect, one of the benefits of being a monk is that you get to attend to your teacher. You look after the needs of your teacher, care for them when they're sick, look after them, clean up for them, assist them in different things. And one of the things you sometimes do is provide foot massage or arm massage. So I used to do that regularly for Ajahn Chah when he was alive. And the power of his and the depth of his samadhi and the kind of good energy that he got from that, and also from a mind that was completely clear of any kind of mental defilement, because we believe he's an arahant. One of the ways that seemed to manifest in the body was his body always seemed very supple, very soft, and even though he was aging and did have a lot of pain because of various illnesses he had, but his body didn't seem to express that. He never seemed to tense up. His skin was always kind of a pinkish colour, a bit like, everyone said it was like a baby's skin. It was a very soft, pinkish colour, because one of the effects of samadhi is it boosts the flow of oxygen around the body in the bloodstream, and kind of gives this softness to the body. In Chinese medicine they talk about qi, same sort of thing. And so even though Ajahn Chah was old, ill, and no doubt had many painful feelings, his body never seemed to express that. And that's, I used to massage him with the other monks sometimes for half an hour at a time, 4 times a day, for many days on end. So got used to the way his skin was, the way his body was, quite familiar with it, and we never used to notice any kind of tension. So the more you meditate, even though you may have some physical pain to put up with, but the state of mind and the samadhi you develop can be very helpful for dealing with that and for dissipating it even.
Dear Lung Paul, can you please help me understand the different types of consciousness as explained by the Buddha?
Well, consciousness is one of the ways we talk about the mind. The word probably the most commonly used word for consciousness is vijnana. And you'll hear that particularly when we talk about a human being. The way the Buddha described a human being is a collection of 5 groups of experience, what we call the 5 khandhas, the 5 groups, the 5 bundles of experience. So we have physical form, feelings, perception, mental formations, which is the thinking mind, and particularly volitional mind, the thoughts, the plans, the desires we have. And then vijnana is consciousness. And you have 5 types of consciousness based on your 5 external physical senses. So that's eye consciousness. When you have a healthy eye and there's light, seeing can take place, or eye consciousness. Ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness or taste. Then the consciousness associated with being sensitive with the skin, touch, can feel hard, soft, hot, cold. And then the 6th consciousness is the mind itself. The mind is able to know thoughts, concepts, ideas, images. So there's these 6 types of consciousness. There's the eye and its object, and there's the eye consciousness. So basically it just means knowing, that quality of knowing. The mind knows through the senses, through the 5 external senses and through the mind itself. Knowing arises. So consciousness is really knowing. Another way we talk about it is mano vijnana. That's the 6th consciousness when we talk about mind consciousness itself, the mind that knows internally. Another word we use is citta. You hear that quite a lot. Citta is often translated as mind or heart or mind-heart. But again, it's that quality of knowing. Just knowing or cognizing through our senses, the way the Buddha talked about it is, in a way, it's just neutral. It's not yet knowing good or bad, right or wrong, it's just knowing. But because when consciousness arises, and consciousness is constantly arising from moment to moment, so the Buddha said, it's a temporary thing, arising and passing away from moment to moment. But because there's links and a sense of continuity, we don't tend to notice that. But you could just reflect, one moment you're seeing, and then maybe you're listening, maybe you're processing what you've heard, so you're thinking about it, even though your eyes are still there and it may appear like you're seeing, but now your mind is with the thinking or with the hearing, or when you're eating, it's with the tasting. Consciousness arises from moment to moment in different places. It's with the seeing, it's with the hearing, but the sense of continuity gives you this sort of sense like it's all happening at the same time, but actually it's distinct moments. But because our mindfulness is not sharp enough, or we often don't see that. So that's one aspect of consciousness, is it's impermanent, rising, passing away, changing. Another thing is it's conditioned, and each moment of consciousness is conditioned by previous moments of consciousness and then the contents of each moment of consciousness. So in each moment of consciousness you get feeling, pleasant, neutral or unpleasant, and you get perception. So like consciousness, eye consciousness is just seeing particularly colours, shapes, but it's not yet giving any labels or any real interpretation to that. It's just seeing. It's kind of bland, it's kind of ordinary. But then because perception arises, and that's another one of the 5 khandhas, with the seeing, then you're giving meaning to what you see. So you see a colour blue, and then the perception is saying that's the sky, if that's where you're looking. But just because we have perception arising and feeling as well, it's pleasant, unpleasant, with our seeing consciousness, for example, doesn't mean to say what we're seeing and our perception and interpretation of it is correct or wise or good. We often are interpreting what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell incorrectly because of the effect of what we call kilesas, mental defilements rooted in greed, anger, delusion. And they also give rise to the sense of self as well. So you also get this sense of I am seeing, my eyes, I'm seeing, my consciousness. So if it's seeing something that's giving rise to pleasant feeling and interpreted in a certain way, you might say, I'm seeing this and I like this, I want this. Gives rise to desire, and that gives rise to more moments of consciousness with desire maybe. One thing leads to another. So consciousness is conditioned by things, conditioned by sankhara, mental formations, our intentions, and the quality of the mind from moment to moment. So it can be a moment of defiled consciousness, or it can be a moment of liberating consciousness, which is why we practice mindfulness a lot. Mindfulness is the quality of recollecting in the present moment. So when you're mindful of consciousness, you know that you know. When you're not mindful, you may be deluded or caught into a state of unawareness, unmindfulness. You're still knowing, but you don't know that you know. But because you can know that you know, you practice mindfulness, there's a chance to really see consciousness as it is, in an unbiased way, and to start seeing some of these features like the impermanence of consciousness, the lack of self in consciousness, the fact that it's a conditioned thing that arises, passes away. Through practice, one starts to become aware of that, and that gives rise to insight, and that's liberating for us because helps us to remove a lot of delusions, false perceptions, misunderstandings of the world, and ultimately remove the experience of suffering from our mind, from our experience. So consciousness, one of the good things about it is it can be purified from defilement, and basically Nibbana is that. It's the mind, the conscious mind that no longer is affected by greed, anger, delusion, or defilement. And the Eightfold Noble Path is what you practice to get to that point. So it's a gradual purification. We say purification of knowledge and vision. The way we know things, the way we view things, to the point where the mind is no longer conditioned by defilements. And the mind that is no longer conditioned by defilements is no longer has a sense of self. The sense of self, being, me, mine, myself, is gone from that experience. So they call Nibbana the uncreated, the unformed, the unborn. And for somebody who's reached Nibbana, there's no more birth and death. They're outside of the cycle of birth and death. Because another aspect of consciousness is that because it is a conditioned thing, it also is part of the trail or the chain of causes and conditions that give rise to birth, aging, sickness, death. And there are different kinds of consciousness depending on how we train it, how we develop it. So, say, developing samadhi, one might attain jhana. And if one masters the jhanas, one may experience the very refined states of consciousness of jhana, the rupa jhanas, the form jhanas, or the arupa jhanas, the formless jhanas. And at death, if one hasn't reached Nibbana, one may be reborn with that kind of consciousness in a form realm or a formless realm. So there's a lot one can learn by investigating consciousness, but we start with this simple getting to know, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and you're using what we have. The tools that we have are our 5 external senses and then the mind itself. And from there, studying and learning and developing insight into the nature of consciousness, one's knowledge and vision deepens.
Dear Ajahn, if we aim to earn money, is this going to increase our greed and attachment?
Maybe. Of course, we have to earn money to live in the world, unless you're a monk or a nun. Buddhist monks and nuns, we don't own money, handle money. They're the one class of humans that don't have to get involved with money, so that's why we lead a stress-free life. But for the majority of people in the world, money is a convention. It's an agreed form of medium of transaction. So, most people will agree. In most societies, you agree things have a price, and you give money, you can buy goods and services, you can perform services, create wealth, create products, and that will also give you an income, get paid a salary, and so on. So it's a convention, and it's a useful one that helps the world to go the way it needs to develop, for human beings to get the things they need: food, accommodation, clothing, the basics of life. But it can easily be hijacked by greed, as we know. When we're not very mindful of the presence of greed in our thinking, it takes over the mind, so money can become an end in itself. The desire to gain more wealth, more property, more money can become something that's all-consuming. As the Buddha pointed out, greed, when pursued, there's no limit to it. There's no end to it. They had to say, Nati Danhana Samanati. There's no river as long as the river of craving. And craving is what we call unwholesome desire. It can easily center around money and wealth. So that's the danger. So on the one hand, money and earning money is a very useful thing because it's the way we can survive in the world, and up to a point it works. Human beings, 7.5 billion human beings are living in the world, performing economic transactions, going to work, earning what they need. To a certain extent, up to a point, it works. But of course, when greed takes over, then problems come, and we can say one of the modern problems is starting to treat human beings as simply units of wealth, units of production, and we can start looking at other human beings in not a very good way, losing the awareness of humanity and just treating people according to their output or what they can do for me. Even in our social relationships, sometimes it can be like that, can't it? What can this person do for me? How can I get ahead, get more money from this person? Or in the worst case, it's criminal activity where we just see people as victims or potential victims that we can somehow get money off them, and so on. So that's the problem, is money can very easily stimulate greed and attachment. So we have to practice to be aware of the danger and to work out skillful ways to deal with that. So the Buddha, if you study the Eightfold Noble Path, part of that is learning how to live in the world, earn a living in a fair, honest, compassionate way, that doesn't exploit other human beings or even animals. That's our aim. So we practice right action, right speech, right livelihood. And if the more you study that and practice that, you'll realize, well, these are very good guidelines for how to earn your living so that you're not hurting others, hurting yourself, making negative karma. And it's a good way to learn from your behavior. Am I giving in to greed? Because when you no longer follow the guidelines of the 5 precepts, say, or right livelihood, then it's a sign you've given in to greed sometimes. And the Buddha certainly didn't say people shouldn't work and attain wealth. I mean, we have to do that to a certain extent because anyone who has been in a situation where they have, very poor, can't afford to pay the bills, don't know where they're going to stay at night, don't know where the next meal is coming from. It's very difficult to develop the other parts of the Buddhist path if you're in that situation. The basics of life are to get the basic necessities, food, accommodation, clothing, medicine for when you're sick. This is the basics all human beings need. And if there are those who don't have it, well, we do our best to share what we have. If we have enough to share, we practice generosity and dana to help the others. But all human beings need to get to that point where at least they have the basics. Then you start to free up your energy and your mental energy and your skills and your time and your knowledge you can free it up for the Dhamma practice if you've got the basics established. But what often happens is the greed does come into the equation, and we start just seeking more wealth, more power, more influence, more of the worldly success, and forget the Dhamma. And that's why we have so much stress and conflict in the world, because people do forget the Dhamma and go in the way of greed, and that also will stimulate aversion. The more you're attached to money, then if anyone comes along to take your money away in one way or another, whether it's through trade or stealing or whatever, then you get angry, don't you? So the attachment to money and wealth does also stimulate anger and conflict. So the Buddha encouraged us to always come back to keeping the 5 precepts, practicing right livelihood, right speech, right action, and then practice generosity. Because when you practice generosity as a regular thing, you're counteracting the tendency, the habit towards greed. So not only are you making money for yourself and your family, but you're also sharing it with those in need and supporting useful causes in society, and it will help. And you'll notice you'll tend to get much more satisfying kind of happiness, deeper happiness from practicing dana, generosity, than you do from just acquiring more wealth. It's just a psychological fact. It doesn't mean to say there's no happiness in acquiring more wealth, but sharing that wealth and using it in a good way that is not for your own selfish ends, but it's for the good of others as well, you tend to get many more happier thoughts, happier memories, good feeling. And that's something to experiment with. Many people have found when they started practicing generosity, little by little, they kind of open up their heart and they find, they're experiencing a lot more happiness than they used to. If you're only focused on what's in it for me, get more, your mind tends to be not so peaceful, not so happy. It's not such a good space. As I said, the ones who really don't have this problem, normally speaking, are monks and nuns. They practice renunciation of a very high level, so you give up your rights to money, hold money, use money. Ajahn Chah used to say, there was one time a monk came to see Ajahn Chah, wanted to stay with him and study with him, and Ajahn Chah said, yeah, okay, and the monk said, but I brought some money with me. I want to stay here and practice in your monastery, but can I just keep my money? And Ajahn Chah said, yeah, you can keep it. If you can find me some salt that doesn't taste salty, then you can keep your money. Meaning that if you have money, especially as a monastic, it's going to bring up some attachment, some greed. It's not really appropriate for a monastic to have or hold money. So it's like salt. It's always going to taste salty. It's always going to stimulate some greed. But in the lay life, because it's a medium of transaction, well, you have to have it and use it, earn it, but manage it well so it doesn't turn into greed. And one can practice like in the time of the Buddha. Visakha, the lady, and Anathapindika, they both became sotapannas, and they also used money and carried on business in the world, but they managed it through the precepts, through right view, and through meditation, developing mindfulness. And one of the happiest things, when you hear monks or nuns talking about, when they decide to become a monastic, one of the happiest, fun things is if they have had any wealth, the giving away of their wealth. In Thailand, there's one famous teacher, Lumpur Prom. He didn't ordain as a monk until he was about 38 years old. He was with Lumpur Man, was his teacher, and as a layperson he was quite successful. He did a lot of business, trade, he was a farmer, and he also became the village headman, which is, he's like a local politician, a local councillor, the head of the local, like the mayor, and he was a well-respected businessman in his area, but he was also practicing meditation, and the best antidote to greed is practice meditation. So you get to see greed, you see the suffering that comes from it, you become mindful, you develop the contentment of peaceful states of mind so you can counter your greed and let it go. And he did exactly that. Him and his wife, they both worked very hard for their family, earned a lot of money, but then they decided, they both had faith in Ajahn Man and the practice, and they both decided they wanted to leave the lay life and go into the monastic life. And there's this famous story of how they had a 3-day giveaway of all their wealth. I can't remember whether they had children or not. They either didn't have children or they already set up their children for life, but I believe they may not even have had children. But anyway, once they decided to become a monk and a nun, before they did that, for 3 days they made this announcement in the local district and said, anyone who needs a bit of extra stuff, come to us, we'll give you it. And they basically gave away everything. It's like a kind of a garage sale without money. They just gave away all their furnishings, clothes, possessions, tools, sacks of rice, animals, because they were farmers as well. Everything they had was gradually given away. And they said there were queues of people coming to just collect free stuff. And the house and land was given away. In the end, everything went, and they went off to the monastery and became monks and nuns in different monasteries. And it only took Lumpur Prom 5 years to become an arahant, because Ajahn Man used to praise him, say, this monk, he really has commitment to the practice. He meditates, he has faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, he's not wasting his time. And they give him as an example of someone who knows what it's like to accumulate wealth in the world, but then he saw the harm of it, or the danger of attachment, and he gave it all up and quickly became enlightened. So that is another very direct way to deal with the possible attachment to greed and greed in money and wealth, is to ordain, meditate, and reach Nibbana.
Dear Luang Por, I have been keeping 8 precepts for 4 months. Lately, it is happening that I will feel hungry halfway through my evening sitting meditation. One of my legs will start to jerk and my body will swing to ease the discomfort. How should I proceed with the sitting meditation?
Well, firstly, if you've been keeping the 8 precepts for 4 months, that's a very noble thing you've been doing, worthy of praise. So that's something very good. You can feel happy about that, and it will certainly be a great boost to your practice that you've done that, you've completed that. I'm not sure the questioner how old you are, because the older you get, sometimes it can become more difficult to keep the 8 precepts. And one of those difficulties is you're not eating afternoon. As you're probably aware, one of the ways we deal with that, well, we have what we call afternoon medicines. There's a small amount of things we're allowed, or one is allowed to eat or consume in the afternoon to help allay hunger, feelings of tiredness or sickness. So depending on the tradition you're trained in, fruit juice, tea, coffee, sugar, honey, these things are allowed. In our tradition, we're also allowed dark chocolate without nuts or anything, and cheese is allowable. And in appropriate amounts, one can use these in the afternoon just to allay the hunger, and just drinking water, juice and things. So if you've been doing that already and you're still experiencing hunger during your meditation, you might also have to accept that if you've been living in the world many years and eating an evening meal, well, that memory, that perception, or you might say attachment, will quite often come up during an evening meditation. You have to be very patient with it. Obviously, we don't want you to starve, so eat enough during the first part of the day and have some of these allowables if it helps. But then also practice mindfulness of the feeling of hunger and the thought processes that feeling might stimulate. And as you're becoming more mindful, you might find the feeling is tolerable. It is just a feeling and can be allayed with drinking water or whatever. As long as your health is not being affected by it, and just be very patient with the feeling and try to use it as a basis for mindfulness and developing contemplation. See it as impermanent. Feeling is just a feeling, it's not self. But if it's also leading to this reaction, moving your leg, jerking, I'm not sure if that's because of painful feelings in the body or this feeling of hunger, but either way, try to be very patient with whatever feelings are arising during your meditation. You remind yourself to be patient with them. Try to develop a meditation object that you can focus on to turn your attention away from the feelings so that you stop jerking or you stop thinking about food or the hungry feeling. You have to experiment to see what works, but your number one priority is to maintain mindfulness as you meditate, not to give in to the desire to move, not to create extra suffering or mental agitation because of the various feelings you're experiencing, but just to maintain mindfulness. And to know your limit, how long you can sit successfully without moving around a lot, where you have enough mindfulness to sit. Get to know what your limits are and accept some days are easier than others. Some days you feel physically very well and very easy. Others you might feel ill or tired or have these feelings of hunger. And reflect on them as impermanent, as suffering, as not self. See if you can develop some insight around them, and then alternate. Maybe if you're finding sitting hard, do some walking. Walking meditation, even indoors, is quite possible. And experiment a bit, but keep coming back to developing mindfulness and seeing the arising and passing away of feelings so that you don't attach to them too much.
The last question this evening: what is the benefit of contemplating death as a meditation?
The contemplation of death, marananusati, or recollection of death as a meditation object. It's one Ajahn Chah used to recommend sometimes when people found nothing else worked. They couldn't follow the breath, they couldn't develop any other meditation object, and their mind was just spinning, thinking, very agitated, don't know what to do. He would say, recollect death as a way to bring the mind to the present moment and cut through a lot of this mental proliferation which we're often prey to. It's like this kind of alien force takes over the mind and you just keep thinking about one thing after another. Some of it is to do with work, relationships, health, the future, the past, random distraction. And you can't seem to put your mindfulness on anything or slow this thinking mind down. It seems to be going all over the place. Or bring up the perception of death, because it's a very powerful perception and it can quickly quieten the mind down. Just as in daily life, if suddenly you hear the news someone you know has died unexpectedly, it tends to shock you a little bit. You stop what you're doing, you think about it, it wakes you up. So one of the immediate benefits of the recollection of death is it wakes you up, brings you to the present moment. It's a powerful thought. And then after that, you often feel very calm, strangely enough. The purpose of this meditation is not to make you feel depressed or morbid. It's to help bring your mind to the present moment, to establish mindfulness, and it also can develop into a contemplation as well. So when you practice mindfulness of death as an object, often people in the beginning, they just do it as a discursive meditation, meaning they're just thinking about the theme of death. What does death mean to me? And you just bring up these thoughts, everyone must die, everyone I know must die. When I die, what will it mean? It will mean the end of this body, the end of my connection to all the people I know, the things I own, the place I live. I'll separate from all that. All of that will stop. This body will stop. Other people's body will stop, either before me or after I die. After I'm gone, what will be left? I won't be there. Will anyone remember me? All of these thoughts you can bring up in a meditative way. Just reflect through the meaning of death. When will it happen? Don't know. So it immediately brings your mind to a point where it can't think a lot to answer that question. I don't know. I know I'll die, but I don't know when. So the reflection on death in this way, thinking it through, helps to cut through a lot of mental proliferation, doubt, uncertainty, worry. So many meditators do use it because they find it makes the mind go quite peaceful. And it also gives quite a skillful insight into life. Because as you've been reflecting on death for a while, your mind goes quiet. You start to appreciate life better because you realize it is finite. You're not going to be here forever. So the time you have is valuable and you don't want to waste it. So the reflection on death has many benefits. It helps you to cut through a mind that is very agitated, thinking a lot. Helps you to develop the path because you realize this is the most valuable thing for me because time is limited. There are many benefits like this. It helps you to face up to fear because a lot of our fear, conscious or subconscious, is based around fear of death. Nobody wants to die, it's not what you want, it's not what we like. So we have a lot of aversion and fear to the idea of death. And one of the ways human beings deal with that is just push it out of their consciousness. They don't want to think about it. You hear people say, don't talk to me about death. In China, if you talk about death, they say, don't talk about death because it'll make you die quicker. But we don't want to think about it or talk about it. It's a difficult subject, but when you're brave and willing to look into death, what you find is the fear of death starts to subside quite quickly, and you're bringing your mind to see just the normality of death, because it's just the end of life and everyone has to face that. And as this fear of death subsides, your mind opens up to absorb a lot more information and good understanding of the world, because you understand impermanence better, you understand the importance of relationships better. So like people who reflect on death tend to be people who actually become much more grateful for their life, the help they've received. They become people who appreciate the good things in the world, because once you're reflecting on death, you realize a lot of this is going to disappear when you die. And so you tend to be more appreciative, more willing to share and give back. So there's all these additional benefits that come when you develop the reflection on death. And another one is even the sense of aversion towards other people subsides when you reflect on death, because if you are aware very clearly in your mind that at some point you're going to die, and that's quite up in the forefront of your thinking, then say you become angry with someone, it won't take you long to realize, what's the point of hanging on to this anger and ill will towards this person, because they're going to die, I'm going to die. Do I want to die with an angry state of mind? So it even helps us to let go of our anger. As far as practicing the contemplation of death, as I said, it's a good way to begin it is just think it through as a discursive meditation. Meditation on the theme of death, thinking it through, what does it mean to you? But then as one does it more often and becomes more skilled, you might reduce it down to just one image or one word. So it's a very simple meditation, a recurring meditation on the theme, the object of death. So traditionally you might pick one word, like maranang, which is the word for death in Pali, language of the Buddha. So maranang, maranang, maranang. Or you could use English or your own language, death, death, death. Or a phrase like death is sure, death is certain, I will die for sure. You can experiment whether it's a word or a phrase, but then you keep that one word or phrase in your mind and recite it over and over again to keep mindful from moment to moment and using death as the object of your recollection. And when the mind becomes calm, samadhi arises, you may drop the words or the image of a corpse, whatever, you drop that and your mind becomes focused on the present moment and in a very good state to contemplate the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. One other thing that meditation on death can lead on to is what we call corpse contemplation, what we call the asupa, the 10 asupa recollections, where you're developing the perception of the body as a corpse, because eventually each person's body will become a corpse. So in Buddhist countries, even like Thailand or Sri Lanka, even today, sometimes there's still the opportunity for, particularly for monastics, monks and nuns, to go and visit autopsies on corpses. Like when I was living in Thailand, we regularly would be invited to one of the hospitals to see an autopsy where they cut open a corpse as a way of learning about the human body and to get to understand the body after death, what it's like, what it looks like, smells like, the degeneration of the corpse, and so on, as a meditation. And even in some monasteries I stayed in, the villagers, if they had somebody die who had no relatives or had died usually as a result of a crime, they'd been murdered and nobody wanted to perform the funeral for whatever reason, they would often bring the corpse into the monastery and place it in a shallow open grave for monks to meditate next to. So when I was a young monk, I used to do that quite often, spent many hours of my life sitting next to a decomposing corpse, which sounds a bit weird in normal thinking, but as a meditation subject, it's a rare opportunity to do that. And at the same time, you share the merits of your meditation with that person who's died. The Buddhist belief is that when somebody dies, their consciousness is reborn in a new life, and if there's someone who's died, say from a murder, or they've had no relatives with them when they died, and you're with their corpse, well, you share merit with them and wish them to find peace in their next life. So you are doing a service to them, and they're doing a service for you. They provided your body. I mean, it's just like donating your body to science, I guess, but this is donating your body to the monastery, and people come and meditate and learn from that. And it's scary sometimes for some people, anyone very afraid of death or ghosts, they find that practice hard. But when they make the effort, they find they get very peaceful, and it does, their mind learns to recognize death. It's just nature. They have a saying in Thailand, they say, why are people always afraid of skeletons? When you see a horror movie, if there's a skeleton, everyone gets scared, or sometimes the skeleton stands up and chases someone and you get scared. Why is everyone afraid of skeletons? Because everyone has a skeleton. We're like walking skeletons. Take a moment just to think, this body is just a skeleton. This body is a corpse. Another one that we used to say is, when you look at a human being, or you look at yourself in the mirror, what are you seeing? All that you're seeing is dead material, dead cells. The hair is dead. Otherwise you wouldn't have hair. It's come out and it's dead. That's why when you touch it, you can cut it. It doesn't hurt. It's dead. Your nails are dead. The surface layers of your skin are dead. That's why you can rub your skin and it doesn't hurt. You have to cut into it to get to the lower levels, then you reach the nerves and it does hurt, of course, but the outside layer is dead. And that's why you get a lot of dust in the world. Skin comes off as dust. So everything you're seeing in a human being, even if they're very beautiful, handsome, doesn't matter. You're seeing a corpse. You're seeing dead cells, the dead part of their body. It's just we shape it. We cut their hair, we put products on our skin, try and make it look good, but actually you're just dressing a corpse. So worth thinking about, isn't it? Next time you're becoming besotted with somebody, you find them so attractive, so handsome, just ask yourself, but what am I getting attracted to? It's just dead cells. Some people wear a wig to try and make themselves look nicer. Well, that wig is just dead hair from some other corpse. So, it's a good reflection to sober you up, because the Buddha always pointed out, we get intoxicated by beauty, by youth, by the glamour of the world. And when you reflect on death, you're seeing the impermanence of everything, and it sobers you up. It wakes you up to the truth of things, so you don't get so lost, so drunk on attachment to the world, physical form, beautiful things. So when you reflect on death regularly, you get used to being aware, people you meet, one day they'll die. I'll die first, they'll die first, I don't know, but one day we'll separate through death. Every item you buy, every item you get into your house, one day it will die. In the sense it will separate from you, you'll separate through death, or it will break. You sit on a chair. If you're sitting on a chair now, that chair is wood, isn't it? And what is wood? It's dead trees. When trees die, they cut them up into wood and make furniture and houses and things out of them. So everything we're looking at in the world is pretty much dead stuff. There's not a lot around that's actually alive. There are, the green parts of trees and plants is alive, but so much of what we're involved with is just dead stuff. Clothes is dead, dead cotton, dead other materials, carpets, whatever you've got around you is dead. So just be awake to that, and it can help your mind. It both wakes you up, makes you mindful, and cuts through, brings up wisdom and right view, where you're seeing the nature of this world is impermanent. So recollection of death, there are many benefits that come from it, and particularly it can help you to develop samadhi and then wisdom from that. So that was the last question. So I think that's it for tonight. So I hope whatever we've discussed tonight has been useful for you, and we wish you well in your practice. May you be healthy, may you have a peaceful mind, and may you be blessed by the Triple Gem.